Hey, Flimsy Lunch Tray here with another upgrade and commander build for you today. And we're going to be looking at the Tier 8 US battleship, the North Carolina. And she is she's among my favorite Tier 8 battleships. She probably takes second place following Massachusetts, but since the commander reworked, Massachusetts just hasn't been the same. And I lean a little more towards North Carolina in that regard, just to get the main battery accuracy. But looking at North Carolina, let's look her over. So first, kind of doing this new thing with armor layout, just to show you guys. So you can see you've got the 32 millimeter front fore and aft end armor, same on both ends. And then you've got your 32 millimeter belt and superstructure, really easy to farm at HE. And then you've got your armor belt and a citadel. Is that waterline? Yeah, so your citadel belt is like right on the water. Oh, I can't pronounce things correctly. Because you can kind of see let's take away the front. Yeah. So her basically, I want to point out is that her citadel is just beneath the waterline, so that's kind of nice to know. So naturally, you still always want to angle in North Carolina. Now, in terms of the battleship we're talking about here, she's not a brawling battleship. She's a battleship with accurate guns, rocking the 4.6 millimeters, and more accurate than the Massachusetts guns. And so she plays better at mid to long range distance, especially her range. Like I have a 27 kilometer range, and that's without using spotter plane. So you're going to find using her more mid to the longer ranges, and just how she's set up. So let's look at the modules first. So you get 3 upgrades that you can go with for the modules. You get the Hull B, which gives you over 12,300 more HP, along with a better AA defense and maneuverability. And then you get a modification or upgrade for the gunfire control system, which takes you from 24.5 kilometers to the 27. And then you get an upgrade of the propulsion, where your maximum speed is increased to 27.5 knots. And you feel that when you don't go with this. But in most all cases, I always upgrade the hull first, just because the health pool difference is pretty vast. So it's always good to go for the hull first and then follow suit. Upgrade-wise, it's going to be pretty standard. For slot 1, we're going to take main armaments modification 1. So this reduces the risk of the main battery becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. And also, the main battery survivability time is increased. Your main battery survivability is increased by 50%. So basically, it's going to be harder to knock out your main guns. And then your main battery repair time, if your main battery should become incapacitated, will be fixed negative 20% faster. For slot 2, you're going to look at damage control system modification 1. And that will reduce your risk of catching fire and risk of flooding decreased. So that's always a good one. You really don't ever have your engine knocked out much. Slot 3, you've got a few options one could go for. You have the main battery traverse speed, you have secondary battery modification, you have your AA gun modification, and your artillery plotting room modification 1, which I prefer the most. Because it extends your main battery firing range in connection with this, so you're just being able to reach out further. And then also the secondary battery firing range is increased by plus 5%. So our secondary armament is now hitting 6.9 kilometers without any additional signals. And they're also slightly more accurate. So I would recommend going for the artillery plotting room. But at the same time, if you find that you don't need that plus 16% range, say for the main battery, then I'd recommend taking the main battery traverse speed, which is something I'm honestly kind of torn between the two right now, because she already has such good range that you could technically take the main battery modification 2 for quicker traverse speed, because the turrets right now go 180-degree turn time is 45 seconds. It's not great, but it's not terrible. So yeah, maybe one of these two options. I might end up switching to the main battery for modification 2, but it's up to you. If you feel like you want to long range it more, then I would say go for the artillery plotting room modification 1. But if you like to fight maybe more in those mid to closer ranges, then main battery modification 2 is probably going to be better of the two options. For slot 3 or 4, you have 3 options. I would recommend going for damage control system modification 2 because it accelerates the fire extinguishing and recovering from flooding. So it is decreased by negative 15% for both fire extinguishing time and flooding recovery time. For the 5th slot, I would recommend taking concealment system modification 1 because it reduces your detectability range by sea and air by 10%. Also decreases squadron detectability range, and the dispersion of shells fired by enemy ships attacking your ship is increased by plus 5%. So when we look at concealment right now, and this is already with concealment expert on, we have 12.7 kilometers. And then if we go to exterior, we throw a camouflage on. Then your concealment drops to 12.3. So she's a really nice stealthy battleship when you maximize the concealment capabilities of the ship. So I like that. It helps if you need to disengage and get away versus perhaps some other battleships at the tier. And then you have consumables. You have your damage control party. You have repair party ships consumables. So we actually have superintendent or whatever they call it now. So we have 5 heals. And then you get an option between spotting aircraft and fighter. So in this instance, for example, if you want to have faster turrets, usually I'd always take the spotting aircraft. Just depends if I'm in ranked, then I might look at taking the fighters. But we very well easily could. I'm just actually going to go ahead and demount this. See what our range is now. 23.3. I mean, you're at tier 8. I mean, sometimes you will be facing tier 10. But we take the main battery modification 2. So faster traverse speed on the main battery. We go from 45 to 39.1 seconds. So I think that's going to be the best option. I do like to do drive-bys every now and then, so it is nice to have that quicker turning turrets. And then once you launch a spotting aircraft, because our range is 23.3, and then we multiply that. So I'll just pull up my calculator real quick so I can give you guys a good idea. 23.3 times 0.2 is 4.66. 4.66 plus 23.3, which means with spotting aircraft, you're just getting right under 28 kilometer range, so 27.96. So then I would recommend, I mean, even if you don't take spotting aircraft, like 23.3 kilometers is still pretty impressive. So let's go to the commander. So my throat's a little sore right now, so I apologize if it sounds like I'm struggling a little bit. I'm trying to get it more on track. So let's look at the commander here. So I don't have a 21-point commander yet for North Carolina as an example. That's probably going to be some time before that occurs. But let's look at what I have so far. So right now we have, for a first skill point, I took gun feeder. So time taken to switch between shell type is reduced by negative 50%. So that means a 15-second switch. So you could, if you don't, I mean, sometimes I like to switch back and forth if I know there's a destroyer coming up on me and I get to change the shells out faster. So it's just my preference to take this. For 3 points, so your next 2 points, I personally like to go for priority target, and I'm going to give 2 options here. I use priority targets. One, it just helps keep me more aware if there are enemy ships or battleships maybe trying to snipe me at longer range. But I also use it as a way of combating with enemy destroyers. So if I know there's a destroyer around and I keep seeing, let's say, detected to 1 targeting you, detected to 1 targeting you, then I know he's likely dropping torpedoes at that time, and then I change direction, I change speed, and I try to do that regardless, even if I'm not entirely sure if the destroyer is after me or not, but if I know there's one near, I'll try to change up. But I like to have prior target. It just helps me keep me more aware. Now, this used to be a 1-point skill. Now it is a 2-point skill. But if you feel like you do fine without priority target, then I would recommend you to take the grease the gears. So your main battery traverse speed is going to be better improved by plus 20%. So we were looking at 39.1. And then if I do multiplication, so 39.1 minus, I think it's 7.82. Then you get down to a 31.28 second turret traverse time for 180 degrees. So you could take that, and then your guns are moving quite well. For me, that's because I knew I was taking priority target. That's why I went ahead and switched the module the third slot on the upgrades to the main battery for modification 2 to help compensate for taking priority target versus grease the gears. So it's up to you which way you want to go there. Next, I recommend for a 6-point commander taking Adrenaline Rush. So this enhances the ship parameters for each 1% of HP loss. So like your main battery reload time, your secondary battery reload time, and your continuous AA damage. That one increases while the other two decrease. So then, you're rocking a 30-second reload, and then you could be getting down to something like 28, 27 seconds, depending on how much health pool you were losing at that point in time. For a 10-point commander, I'd recommend going and take Concealment Expert. Your ship's detectability range is decreased by negative 10%, and with the camouflage, that's what gets us to that 12.3 kilometer range. So it helps if you're trying to move up more in position. You don't want to be spotted at the beginning of the battle, and enemy battleships may be taking pot shots at you. So I like to add that concealment first. Probably one of the things I'll do differently here is in regards to the next points that you have. So I took, for a 14-point commander, I took the, now it's called Emergency Repair Expert, which just gives you an additional heal. I probably actually would have taken Fire Prevention first. So with the 14 points, I'd recommend taking Fire Prevention Expert. So it reduces the risk of catching fire, and the maximum number of fires on a ship is reduced to 3. And also reduces the risk of catching fire by negative 10%, and the maximum number of fires is reduced by 1, so you only get 3 fires. So what fire prevention does is, some people are like, well, I never get 4 fires set on me, because I used to think like this. There are 4 places to get caught on fire on a ship. So you have, for a battleship, you have the bow, you have the forward part of the superstructure, then the rear part of the superstructure, and then the stern. So what fire prevention does is, instead of having 2 fires on your superstructure, you only have 1. And when you're dealing with HE spammers like destroyers or cruisers, they're usually always targeting this section of the ship. And so if you don't have fire prevention, then you're going to have 2 fires burning here, which is going to decrease your health even faster. So that's why it's important to take fire prevention. It prevents that from happening. And then for the next 4 points, then I would recommend taking the Emergency Repair Expert. So what this does is it also increases the action time of the Damage Control Party consumable, as well as the Repair Party consumable action time. And then you get an extra charge for both. But with the US battleships, when it comes to Damage Control Party, you have unlimited amount, where like the Russian battleships, they have a certain amount, but they have I think like a 40-second reload time versus like 120 seconds when it comes to the US battleships here. So having that extra heal, especially if you are trying to balance between, you're getting a lot of HE spam, you're taking fires, but you don't want to maybe burn a heal instantly, then it kind of helps being to go between having that additional heal to heal that. I used to not take this for, I think it was my Massachusetts. Back then it was a 3-point skill, now it's a 4-point skill. But then I realized, after talking with a community contributor, that having that extra hill actually really helped me out a lot, since Massachusetts, you're a bit more brawling, where in North Carolina not so much, but it is good for that additional heal, but also the action time of your damage control party and your repair party consumable lasting longer. So then after, let's see, that's a 18 point build. And then with the last 3 points, I'd recommend taking basics of survivability. So what this does is that your modular restoration time is decreased by -15%, so if something gets knocked out. And then also your fire extinguishing time and your flooding recovery time are also reduced by -15%. So really what this kind of build, when we look overall at the North Carolina that I'm going for, it's mostly a defense, keep myself in the game longer type of build. Because the only attack skill, well, is this considered an attack skill? Yeah. So the only 2 attack skills we have is Gun Feeder and the Adrenaline Rush. Everything else we have is a defense, a survivability, for living longer time within the game. So this is what I would recommend for you to take. At the same time, and I also gave the option of, if you don't take Party Target, then take Grease the Gears. So you have an even faster main battery traverse speed. But for myself, as I shared, I like taking Priority Target, and I just took the main battery traverse upgrade to counterbalance what I'm doing here with this commander build. So let's talk about why don't I take the other skills. So when we're looking around here, you have Pyrotechnician. It's not worth the 1 point. The only thing Consumable Specialist helps with is like your fighter consumable reload time or your spotting aircraft reload time is dropped by -10%. To me, that's not a huge thing, and you can use a point elsewhere. Like if you had 1 point left over, the best one is going to be preventive maintenance. You have emergency repair specialist, so the reload time of the damage control party and the repair party consumable is decreased by -3%. It's like basically 2 or 3 seconds, so it's not like huge. You have incoming fire alert. So warning about a salvo fired at your ship from a distance of more than 4.5 kilometers. So this can be nice. Let's say you went something and you only have 1 point left, then I would consider, if you don't have priority target as an example, using an incoming fire alert or preventive maintenance, which just reduces the risk of your main turrets, steering gears, and engine becoming incapacitated. But for myself, I like the Gun Feeder. We've talked about Grease the Gears. You don't need to take IFHE. It's more ideal for other ships within the game, not so much the North Carolina. You have Vigilance, so extends the torpedo acquisition range even while the hydroacoustic search consumable is active. If you just know that there's a destroyer in the area, you can just play with your throttle, and you can also just change your ship direction regularly. Because for myself, I'd rather have those 2 points in something like Priority Target or Grease the Gears. You have AA Gunner. Also, if you did want to do an AA build, let's see. You still have 2 left. But you really need fire prevention is the problem. If you want to build an AA battleship, I think there's other battleships that probably do that a little bit better in the game. Where for myself, North Carolina, I'd rather just focus more on her survivability and defensive measures. You have super heavy AP shells. This gives you the perk of your main battery shells, AP shells causing 5% more damage, but it's crap because of the fire extinguishing time and the flooding recovery time. I think it is in an upcoming update, because right now this is update 0.10.4, where they're going to drop the fire extinguishing and flooding recovery time, I think from +30 to +20 or 25%. But then you're just losing out on what these are all about. So this skill's garbage. They need to balance it better, because I can't remember if this was for the cruisers. It was going to increase the damage of the main battery AP shells by to 7.5%. Don't remember. If you want to have a secondary battleship, just take Massachusetts. Don't try to make a secondary build out of North Carolina. Her guns, the main battery guns on North Carolina is what makes her really stand out more so than the Massachusetts. The Massachusetts, you'll fire, you got a perfect broadside on a cruiser like 11, 12 kilometers away. The shells get wonky and you do like 4 or 5k damage. Or with North Carolina, you know when you send out those shells, they're going to land almost exactly where you want them to go. So where you might not have depth struck a cruiser 12 kilometers away in Massachusetts, it's much more possible to do that with the North Carolina. So play to the strengths of your ship. We talked about adrenaline rush. We've talked about basic survivability. You have enhanced anti-torpedo protection. To me, it's not worth the 3 points for, because you're not, I mean, not all the time are you going to have torpedoes being fired at your ship. So why not use those skills elsewhere? They might come more in handy, such as that. We did talk a little bit about that one. When you're looking at your AA, though, if you click on this, you can see that the damage by shell explosions, I get a little triangle there because it's changed, where you get 1 additional shell explosion in a salvo that has a 75% hit probability. Again, I feel like you could use your points better versus going for an AA build on a battleship. Tends to be the cruisers have a bit more strength when it comes to an AA build per se. That's not entirely true. I mean, Vermont, you can really make her beastly with AA. But for myself, that's not what you should be going for with the North Carolina. Deadeye is going to be removed. This is going to be switched out with a Swift and Silence. They have it for destroyers. Do you need it for battleship? No. Just don't take it. We've talked about secondaries, not really secondary battleship. You have close quarters combat. So your secondary battery load time is going to be decreased by -10% and then can be activated as your reload speed of the main battery. So after an enemy ship has been spotted within the firing range of your ship's secondary battery. So, for right now, was it 6.9 kilometers you said? Or 6.6, but then I can buff that with a signal. It's just... Again, you're trying to push in close when you're not really a secondary brawling battleship to begin with, where Massachusetts fills that role better. And then we've talked about these 3 skills. All 3 of these. So this would be the build that I would recommend that you take on the North Carolina. Alternatively, again, you can switch out priority target for the Grease the Gears skill. That is up to you and what you wish and desire. But for me, this is just my personal taste and what I like. So I hope this helped you guys out when talking about the North Carolina. She really is a fun ship to play. And I think she's a ship that doesn't always get the credit she deserves. And she can be quite a threat even in ranked battles at tier 8. And she just is a really good battleship for players who are newer to the game to really get a feel for what a good standard type battleship is in World of Warships. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more. And if you have already subscribed, thanks so much. Really appreciate it as we continue to grow the community here and almost to 200 subscribers. So thanks so much. Until next time, take care.